Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to finally get around to showing you how I made my shoes and most of my accessories for your stola. I'm sorry this video took so long. Fanfest chaos was very real, and ever since then I've just been rushing to catch up on some orders because this costume ended up taking a lot more of my free time than I anticipated. So let's just jump right into it, and we're gonna start with the shoes. The first thing I did was the classic cosplay wrap technique while wearing my base shoe to get the pattern for the shoes. I elaborate a little bit more on that in my video on how I put together my harness for the Moogle wings, but you can find hundreds of cosplay tutorials on this technique as well. So I make sure to add notches before cutting up all my pieces and transferring them onto paper. I always add 1 centimeter seam allowance. That's just personally my standard seam allowance for everything. Then it's time to cut and assemble. I'm starting by assembling the long front tab to the 2 front pieces of the foot. Since the front is fairly pointy, I'm marking out the seam allowance to help me position everything properly. Once it's sewn together, I added a stitch while the fabric was wrong side to create a relief that I then hand stitched around to make it look more like the shoes she wears. It's then time to glue everything into place. I use E6000 fabric fuse to glue the piece to the shoes before pinning them down so they can dry in place. The E6000 fabric fuse is going to work really well on this since my base shoe is made from fabric and not leather or faux leather. I then sewed the second section of the shoe together at the center back before doing a test fit. Alright, so this is where I'm at with the shoe. It's not quite working. I have a few things to fix, like if I go down here, this part is too far up. It needs to come further down, and then obviously this is way too far apart, so it needs to come in much closer to the leg. This is also kind of shorter, so I'm debating somehow bring this up higher. And yeah, there's a lot to fix, so I'm gonna go ahead and try to do all these corrections and hope that I have enough fabric to remake them. I went ahead and marked all of my corrections on the first set of pieces and then retraced my piece onto paper. I then cut the new pieces out. Instead of remaking the front tongue, I just sewed the extra length I needed. Okay, here's our piece. This is gonna wrap around the back of the shoe. Now, because there's gonna be some eyelets at the front, I did go ahead and put some interfacing. It's always good. It reinforces that area so that the fabric doesn't rip around the eyelet. But I did decide to put a second strip here of fabric also to reinforce the positioning of the eyelet so that it does not rip out at any point, because there's going to be some straining on the piece. So it'll wrap like this around the foot. So I didn't start the second one. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of finish this one up as much as possible and test out the fit before starting the other one. So, as mentioned earlier, I added a lot of extra layers to the center front so that my eyelets would be properly secured in place. I started by marking where my eyelets would go before applying a strip of interfacing to that section. Interfacing is very important to apply to sections of a costume where you're gonna have trims applied. So eyelets, buttons, snaps, bias tape, you name it. I then added a second layer of fabric along that section to make extra sure that the eyelets wouldn't pop off. Since the fabric is stretchy, I was just very scared that it would just stretch out and the eyelet would just fall right off. Now to finish the outer edge, I overlocked it and then folded it in by 1 cm before sewing it into place. I marked the placement of all my eyelets, there's a lot of them, and then punched out all my holes before using my eyelid applicator to apply them all into place. The contraption really came in handy given how many eyelids I had to apply. Now, before attaching my newly finished back piece to the shoe, I made sure the shoe tongue would hold well around my leg by adding a few elastic tabs that would wrap around my leg. I apparently removed the extra length I had added to the front tongue. I don't actually remember doing that, but I guess it turned out to be unnecessary after I tried on the shoe for a second time. I used my E6000 again to glue the back section into place. To make sure my shoe stays in place, I'm using a pair of dancer's tights and sewing a bunch of snaps to the shoe and to the tights where I want them to hold in place. So this works well enough so long as I don't bend my knees too much. So I wouldn't say it's the most successful of outcomes. All right, so tried it with the skirt, see what it would look like. I think I really like it, but there are a few things that I still want to do. So the first one is at the bottom here, I want to add a little hook and eye so that this stays shut together. I think it'll look nicer. And more importantly is at the top. So the laces are still way too long, so I want to make them shorter so that they're a bit less dangly. I want to add a snap here and here that'll snap onto the lapel part like this. And then a big snap at the back to keep it in place at the front so it doesn't bunch up like this. It stays up nice and straight. But otherwise, we're pretty much done. I don't think I need one at the back. I just need the front to stay up and look nice. And otherwise, yeah, we're almost done with these ones. So I'm gonna keep going also with my pieces for all the feathers and stuff. I have some to add to the side of the skirt and whatnot. But yeah, shoes are almost done. I'm gonna go do that today and then it should be done. I can't stress how chaotic my life was at this point, but amidst the mess of projects I had to finish, I trudged along to finish this piece on time for Fanfest. So now it's time to go over how I made all of the feathered accessories. I think the big thing that I wanted was to be able to pose the feathers however I wanted rather than to have a soft feather. I decided to build a foam base for all my feather pieces. I tried to create a lot of grooves inside the feather by pressing my pencil into the foam, and also created some light notches using my cutting knife. Once you heat it up, the notches spread out, which I think really helps make it look more like a feather. Then I used my spray paint to paint all of my foam feathers the same color as the real feathers I had ordered online. To make sure I could pose my feathers, I installed a wire at the back of each of the foam pieces, which I did a terrible job of filming here, and I'm so sorry about that. All right. Okay, so before I move forward, I'm gonna kind of give a little overview of how we got to where we are right now before I kind of finish up this piece. And yeah, so let's take a look. Okay, so here's what the piece looks like so far. So as you've seen, all the feathers are wired up with a wire at the back. So this allowed me to kind of wrap them all together into one piece. And the fun part is they're all fully malleable, so I can rearrange the feathers in a way that I find more pleasing. They can even like be rebent and unbent here, which is nice, which means that once I am done the wig, I can finalize the shape I want according to how the wig fits on my face. And they can even be kind of moved in like this as needed. So yeah, it's very versatile, which is good because the wig isn't done, so I don't want them to be in one final state until that happens. And then the wires are wrapped around a hairband. Right now they're just holding with a little bit of tape, but what I'm gonna do next is I don't want these wires to get caught in the wig and start messing up the wig. So I'm gonna go ahead, take a ribbon and start wrapping this up and like kind of settle it in with like a little bit of hot glue, just so that after this part is smooth and doesn't interfere with the wig at all. And I think I'm gonna keep the ribbon going all the way down here. It shouldn't be visible once I have the wig because the wig should fall essentially on top. But yeah, so that's the piece so far. I'm gonna keep working on it until the reveal. All that was left to finish was the little feathers Yustola has at the side of her skirt. Here's the finished product, so let me show you how I put those together. So after finishing all of the wire application and stringing them together by twisting the wires, I'm gonna start by sewing in the little silver trim to create a little bit of highlight. I'm putting them only at the base where the feathers are. I'm then using a really thick bias tape and wrapping it around the wires, making sure to go over the top section to create a thicker section. I'm setting it in place with my hot glue and sewing it into place afterwards. I then cover up the bias tape with a black ribbon to soften and smooth out the section. Using some thicker thread meant for sewing jeans, I create a little crisscross motif at the top of the black section. I then sewed in a close-end pin at the back of the section so that it could be pinned in place on the skirt. And that pretty much finished off everything. So let's take a look at the final product. First, let's take a look at the shoes. The first thing I need to do is put on the tights. The tights have snaps sewn into place that will allow me to attach the shoes in place. Thigh-high shoes generally don't hold up very well, so this is a must. I did use a little piece of faux leather at the back of each snap to minimize any risk of ripping. Once I have the tights on, I'll start by slipping my foot into the elastics attached to the shoe tongue. There's one big snap to keep it in place. I'll then attach the rest of the shoe to the snaps on the tights. Small hook and eye at the bottom of the shoe, and then it's easily 5 minutes of lacing up the boots. I'm not gonna lie, putting on these shoes is a super big hassle. They take forever to tie up. Overall, I think the results are pretty nice. I do avoid bending my knees when wearing them because the snaps can snap off, so it's definitely not perfect, but they do, however, look nice. Now let's take a look at all the feather accessories, starting with the headpiece. As seen in the video, all the feathers on the headpiece have wires running through the back. This is super handy because they can be moved and collapsed when traveling in a suitcase and can be reposed as needed when wearing them. Now without a mirror, it's hard to see what I'm doing, so I had to leave the frame to fix them up. But here's the finished piece. I do plan on showcasing them with the wig in the next video. For the feathers attached to the skirt, as seen in the video, they have a closed-end pin that I can use to attach them to the skirt. Once they're attached, I can pose the feathers as needed since they also have wires running at the back. I figured we can now look at a few additional accessories that I didn't really have time to film the progress for. So let's take a look at that, and we'll start with the tail. I used a video from Arboreal Key to design the tail. You can check them out on Instagram or YouTube. They essentially had a video on how they made an articulated dragon tail that uses a piece of fabric as the central structure and places individual foams along that length to allow the tail to move and sway while you walk. So I kind of replicated that with a different shape, of the shape of a cat tail instead of a dragon tail, and then created a fur cover that opens and closes with a zipper so it can easily be swapped out for another color if ever I want to reuse it for other costumes. Overall, it works pretty well, but once I have the skirt on, there's so much volume in the skirt that it's actually impossible for the tail to sway, so it was a little pointless. But maybe it'll come in handy for another cosplay in the future. Last but not least, I opted for the easy option and just ordered an articulated finger piece instead of making one from scratch. It's just my little cheat for this piece because I just couldn't bring myself to make one. I just didn't care. Now for the glove, I Frankensteined 2 different gloves together to mimic the patchwork effect of the skirt and shirt. I actually really like how this piece turned out. Like, it's really nice and snug, and the secret to a snug, literally fingerless glove is using small elastics between the fingers. So that pretty much wraps up today's video. I hope it was interesting. I hope it was helpful. I'm sorry most of it is in voiceover and not in vlog format, but I've just been really busy trying to just get this done for Fanfest. So yeah, I'm literally recording this like way past Fanfest. Speaking of Fanfest, I will eventually want to put out a vlog of our trip to Fanfest and tell you my impressions and feelings and thoughts about the con overall. If you like this kind of stuff, you know, give it a thumbs up, like the video. That's the same thing. You can also check out my Ko-fi. I post a lot of finished cosplay photos there, and I usually put them in galleries, which is really nice. And if you want, you can donate to it. Otherwise, you can go check out all my social media. That costs nothing, and it helps. So, oh my god, I am so bad at doing outros. Yeah, I think that's everything. Otherwise, I guess I'll see you next time. Maybe not, but regardless, have yourself an amazing evening. Bye.